Before we begin this story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. We love knowing where our Whispers of the Heart family is listening from. It was a quiet summer afternoon, bathed in the soft golden light that filtered through the ancient stained glass windows of the church. A hush fell over the assembled guests as she walked down the aisle. Her name was Clara, and her eyes, usually sparkling with an effervescent joy, now held a deep, unshakable glow, reflecting the promise of forever. Her steps were slow, deliberate, each movement a silent vow, as though every heartbeat whispered, "This is the beginning of everything." She was a woman with a soul full of warmth, a laughter that danced on the air like wind chimes, and dreams that reached far beyond the gentle rolling hills of the small town where she was born. Her dress, a simple cascade of ivory lace, seemed to float around her, a perfect embodiment of her ethereal grace, catching the sunlight as she glided forward. Every detail, from the delicate pearls woven into her hair to the subtle scent of gardenias that clung to her, spoke of careful planning and profound anticipation. And there, waiting at the altar, was Elijah. He stood tall and unwavering, a beacon of calm and grounded strength amidst the swirling emotions of the day. His gaze, usually so intense, was softened by an overwhelming tenderness as it met hers. He was a man who had built his life on unwavering loyalty, quiet integrity, and a deep, powerful strength that didn't need to be loud to resonate. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips as he watched her approach, a silent acknowledgement of the beautiful journey that had brought them to this sacred moment. Their paths had crossed 3 years earlier, in the most unlikely of places, a bustling airport cafe. A moment of accidental clumsiness, a spilled coffee across his pristine shirt, had become the unlikely catalyst. What began as an awkward apology quickly blossomed into an easy conversation, then a shared laugh that echoed in the noisy terminal, and that conversation, infused with shared laughter and a surprising sense of connection, became the delicate thread that meticulously wove their two lives together, day by unexpected day. Their wedding was small, elegant, and deeply personal. There were no extravagant gestures, no ostentatious displays of wealth. Instead, it was an intimate gathering of their closest family and friends, imbued with a love that was raw, honest, and truly rare. Every glance, every whispered word, every shared smile spoke volumes of a connection that ran deeper than anything they had ever known. The air hummed with a quiet joy, a palpable sense of rightness, a feeling that this day was simply meant to be, a perfect culmination of their journey. But then, as the vows, spoken with such profound sincerity, concluded, and the gentle applause rippled through the small chapel, a subtle tremor began in Clara's hands. At first, no one noticed, attributing it to the natural jitters of the moment, the overwhelming emotion of becoming a wife. She offered a radiant smile, but her eyes, behind the joyful tears, blinked too rapidly, a frantic attempt to catch something precious, something slipping away, like grains of sand through cupped palms. Her lips moved, forming the shapes of words, but the sounds themselves seemed to get lost somewhere deep inside her, dissolving into an inaudible whisper. The collective sigh of relief, the joyful exhalations of family and friends, abruptly ceased as she swayed. A ripple of concern spread through the first few rows. Then, with a heartbreaking suddenness, she collapsed, right there, before the final celebratory toast could even be uttered, before the first joyful clink of champagne glasses. Her carefully arranged bouquet of white roses and delicate gypsophylla fell silently to the polished marble floor, scattering petals like fallen dreams, each bloom a testament to a moment now shattered. A wave of icy panic surged through the chapel, a collective gasp echoing in the sudden silence that was thick and suffocating. Elijah, his heart plummeting to his stomach, was there in an instant, moving with a speed born of pure instinct, catching her before she fully hit the ground. He held her close, his arms trembling as her body went still, alarmingly still, her skin growing cold beneath his touch, like fragile porcelain. Her breathing became frighteningly shallow, barely perceptible, a faint whisper against the roar of his fear, a barely there flutter against his ear. Her gaze was not one of recognition, but of bewildered curiosity. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice a thin, reedy sound, barely audible above the sudden commotion of medical personnel and hushed whispers. A tremor ran through her, a visible shiver despite the warmth of the room. "Who are you?" "Who?" That was the last thing anyone, especially Elijah, had ever expected. The words hung in the air, a cruel, incomprehensible riddle that shattered the joyous occasion into 1,000 irreparable pieces, replacing wedding vows with an unimaginable question. The silence that followed was even more deafening than the panic. What followed were weeks filled with a relentless barrage of tests, endless, probing questions from specialists, and a cruel, pervasive silence that settled over their lives in the sterile confines of hospital rooms. Doctors eventually delivered a diagnosis, a term that sounded both clinical and utterly devastating. A rare neurological condition, transient memory dysfunction, caused by a sudden, localized trauma to a specific part of the brain that controlled memory recognition. It was as if the intricate pages of her mind had been violently rearranged, some completely torn out, others scattered beyond recognition. Her past, their shared history, their burgeoning love. It had been selectively, mercilessly erased. A cruel, invisible thief had stolen precious moments, leaving behind only emptiness where memories should have been. And Elijah. He became a stranger in her world. The man she had just promised her life to, the man she had loved with every fiber of her being, was now merely a kind face in a sterile hospital room, a gentle hand offering her water, a voice she didn't recognize. He watched, heartbroken, as her eyes scanned his face with no spark of familiarity, no hint of the deep affection they once held. But for him, despite the crushing blow, she was still everything. The love he felt for her hadn't been erased. If anything, it had solidified, becoming an unyielding fortress against the encroaching despair, a quiet vow that he wouldn't abandon her. The doctors, their voices gentle but firm, warned him of the bleak reality. The chances were devastatingly low. She might never remember him again. The profound love they had meticulously built, the promises they had exchanged, might forever remain only in his heart, a solitary echo in a vast, empty chamber, a cherished secret she could never share. And to many around him, to well-meaning friends and worried family, that was more than enough reason to walk away, to grieve the loss and seek solace elsewhere, to move on with his own life, especially to his sister, Madeline. She was practical, blunt, and fiercely protective of her younger brother, seeing his enduring presence as self-inflicted torment. She visited him one evening, 2 months after the wedding, the raw wound of that day still aching in their collective memory. They sat in the dim kitchen of their old family home, the only sound the gentle hum of the refrigerator. The silence between them was heavy, laden with unspoken anxieties, with Madeline's concern and Elijah's stubborn resolve. "She doesn't even know your name, Eli," Madeline said, her voice sharp, cutting through the quiet like a knife. Her wine glass swung slightly in her hand, the amber liquid glinting in the faint light, reflecting her agitated state. "You're wasting your life waiting for a ghost." Her words were laced with a frustration born of love, a desperate attempt to shake him from what she saw as a delusion, but they stung nonetheless. Elijah didn't answer immediately, his gaze fixed on the condensation forming on his glass of water, as if the answers to his turmoil lay within its icy depths, as if he could find solace in the simple droplets. "You need to stop playing the hero," she continued, her voice softening slightly, though the underlying conviction remained, a desperate plea in her tone. "She's not your responsibility anymore. This isn't love, Eli. It's obsession. You need to let her go. You're still young. You can find someone else, someone who knows you, who wants you." The last words were delivered with a desperate plea, a sister's longing for her brother's happiness. a longing to see him reclaim his own life. Elijah finally looked up, his eyes steady, unwavering, filled with a quiet resolve that Madeline rarely saw, a depth of purpose that surprised even her. "She didn't forget me on purpose," he stated simply, but with an unshakable conviction, a fundamental truth that anchored him. Madeline scoffed, a short, disbelieving sound, a gesture of impatience. "That doesn't change the fact that she did." "I remember her enough for both of us," he said softly, his voice imbued with a tender certainty that silenced her for a moment, an almost defiant tenderness. "And I made her a promise, in front of God, in front of everyone. I meant every single word." His words were not a plea for understanding, but a quiet, solemn declaration, a reaffirmation of his unwavering commitment. His sister sighed dramatically, the sound filled with a mix of exasperation and resignation, a recognition that she couldn't sway him. "You're ruining your life for a memory." "No," he corrected, his gaze meeting hers, unflinching. "I'm rebuilding a future, one she doesn't even know she deserves yet." His voice held a quiet power, a promise to himself and to her, regardless of her memory. And so, he stayed. He defied the doctor's warnings, ignored his sister's pleas, and silenced the nagging doubts that whispered in the darkest corners of his own heart. He refused to give up on the woman he loved, even if she had no recollection of that love, even if he was now a stranger in her eyes. He would simply become a new stranger, one who would earn her trust all over again. He found new ways to reach her, subtle gestures that spoke volumes without needing a single word of explanation. He would place her favorite classic novel, Pride and Prejudice, on her bedside table. Its worn cover a familiar comfort, a silent invitation to a world she once cherished. He learned the exact way she liked her tea, 2 sugars, a splash of milk, served in a specific floral cup she instinctively reached for, a tiny detail that spoke of deep, loving observation. He never told her who he was, never forced a memory, never alluded to the life they had almost shared, to the deep connection that once existed. Instead, with immense patience and a heart full of hope, he introduced himself again, this time as someone new, a friend, a helper, a quiet, constant presence in her bewildering new reality, always there, always supportive. Days turned to weeks, then months, marked by small, incremental victories that, to Elijah, felt monumental. Clara would offer a genuine smile when he entered the room, a light spreading across her face that warmed his soul, a sign of growing comfort. She laughed at his silly jokes, a sound that was music to his ears, a familiar melody that brought tears to his eyes, and even rolled her eyes in playful exasperation when he teased her gently about her card game strategy, a familiar gesture that brought a bittersweet ache to his chest, a memory of playful moments they once shared. Slowly, tentatively, she began to ask him questions about himself, about them, a hesitant curiosity in her voice as if searching for missing pieces she didn't even know were gone, a faint echo of a connection buried deep. "I feel like I know you from somewhere," she once said quietly, her brow furrowed in concentration, a faint whisper of recognition in her tone, as if a distant chord had been struck. "I feel like I know you from somewhere," she once said quietly, her brow furrowed in concentration, a faint whisper of recognition in her tone, as if a distant chord had been struck. "Maybe you do," he answered, a slight smile playing on his lips, unwilling to push, content to simply be present, to let her discover it on her own terms. They took long, meandering walks together through the local park, the gentle rustle of leaves beneath their feet, providing a soothing rhythm, the sunlight dappling through the trees as they walked in comfortable silence. They watched old movies on his small television, sharing a bowl of popcorn in easy silence, sometimes discussing the plot, sometimes simply enjoying each other's quiet company. They played cards, a friendly rivalry developing as she slowly regained her sharp wit, her competitive spirit emerging. One quiet afternoon, as they sat on a park bench, the sun warm on their faces, She reached for his hand without realizing it, her fingers intertwining with his in a purely unconscious gesture of comfort and familiarity, a natural movement that bypassed her conscious mind. It was a fleeting touch, but to Elijah, it felt like the entire world tilting back on its axis, a profound reaffirmation that their bond, though unseen by her, still existed. And then, something shifted. Not a memory, not a sudden flash of recognition that brought back every detail of their past, but a feeling, a profound, undeniable sense of connection that transcended the bounds of conscious thought, a deep emotional resonance. Something inside her moved, a stirring of the soul, a deep resonance that defied logic or explanation, a quiet certainty that this man belonged in her life. It was the kind of thing that doesn't need remembering. It simply is, a truth woven into the fabric of her being. One quiet night, as rain tapped gently against the windows of her small apartment, creating a soothing rhythm, a peaceful backdrop, Clara turned to him. Her eyes, no longer blank, held a newfound curiosity, a depth he hadn't seen since that day, a glimmer of the woman he knew. "Why haven't you ever tried to kiss me?" she asked, her voice soft, barely above the sound of the rain, a question born of burgeoning intimacy. A gentle, knowing smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes, filled with both tenderness and a hint of the past. "Because I didn't want to rush a second chance." She blinked, confused, the word second echoing in the quiet room, a puzzling fragment of a story she didn't remember. "Second?" she murmured, a faint furrow in her brow. And he said nothing, just reached out, his fingers incredibly tender as he brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, his touch conveying everything words could not. Then he leaned in and kissed her forehead, a soft, chaste kiss that spoke of patience, adoration, and an unshakable love, a profound promise of a future she was just beginning to grasp. It wasn't long after that night that she found an old photo, hidden away in a drawer she rarely opened, tucked beneath a pile of faded scarves, as if deliberately concealed by time. A wedding photo. Their wedding. She stared at it for what felt like hours, her fingers tracing the faces, her own, beaming and radiant, and his, filled with a quiet joy. The memory, the specific details of that day, the vows, the sudden collapse, those pages remained stubbornly blank, locked away behind an invisible wall. But the feeling did, the profound sense of trust, the echo of laughter, the deep, abiding comfort of being with someone who knows you better than you know yourself, even when you don't know yourself. It was an inexplicable sense of belonging, a quiet certainty that this man, this stranger who had become her closest confidant, was her home, her anchor in a world that had once felt so disorienting. She fell in love with him all over again, not because of a past she remembered, not because of faded photographs or old stories, but because of a present he never gave up on, a present built on his enduring love and unwavering presence. He had rebuilt their connection, brick by painstaking brick, with unwavering patience and boundless love, demonstrating a devotion that transcended the bounds of memory. Elijah, with the same quiet determination, took charge of her ongoing treatment. He tirelessly researched and found a top neurologist abroad, a specialist renowned for treating rare neurological conditions and complex memory disorders. He traveled with her across borders, navigating complex medical systems, sitting through countless appointments, providing her with a steadfast presence, a comforting hand to hold, and an unyielding sense of safety. He gave her not just medical care, but a future, a home. He invested every ounce of his being, every resource he had, into her recovery and her happiness. They eventually moved to a small cottage near the sea, the salty air and the rhythmic sound of the waves a constant, soothing backdrop to their new beginning, a soundtrack to their quiet, rebuilding life. They started from zero, just like two strangers discovering each intricate facet of each other for the very first time. There were no shared memories to lean on, no inside jokes from a forgotten past. Each day was a new discovery, a fresh chapter, written together, hand in hand, But this time they were writing their story together, consciously, deliberately, with eyes wide open to the beauty of their unique journey, word by careful word, without needing to remember how it started, without needing to recall the moment their eyes first met across a crowded airport cafe, or the promises exchanged under the gaze of loved ones. Because sometimes, the real miracle isn't about getting back what was lost. It's about falling in love again, and realizing, perhaps with a profound sense of awe, that maybe, just maybe, that's even more beautiful than the first time. A testament to the enduring power of a love that transcends memory. A love built not on what was, but on the unwavering promise of what could be, forever. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe. Here at Whispers of the Heart, we share true love, second chances, and unforgettable moments, one story at a time. Leave us a comment, let us know what you felt, and don't forget to share this with someone who still believes in love. Because sometimes, a simple story is all it takes to remind us that the heart still whispers, no matter our age.